Today, as we continue our leader series, I want to take a moment to talk about what it means to be dedicated. This is our D in the leader acronym, and today in our current culture, there's not a lot of dedication. The culture around us does not stay committed. We see it in the workforce as no one stays in lifelong careers anymore, but people jump from place to place, or perhaps their employers move them along quickly. Some cultures in certain workforces move employees every 3 to 5 years to keep them productive and busy. We see it in marriages as marriages decline and fall. We see it in all types of places. And yes, we see it even in our church as people do not stay with churches when things get tough, but they hop from church to church. There's a lot of ways we can see sometimes dedication not being played out. But instead of looking at all those bad examples, I wanted to encourage you this morning, if you want to be a true leader in your sphere, you've got to have a deep commitment to what God has called you to. Now, yes, sometimes things change and sometimes seasons change. Employment may change. Life may change and where you live or where you go. But the reality is that we stay dedicated to what God has called us to. And if God has put a calling upon your life in any sphere of your life, and you know He's told you to commit to it, then you are to remain dedicated to that. And you see it best in Joshua. Joshua chapter 1, pretty famous verse. It says there, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do all the law that the Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it, right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go." I love that verse because it's a great picture of dedication. When we're dedicated and committed to something, we don't swerve to the right or the left in the midst of the journey, especially when the journey gets hard. And I don't know where you're sitting today. You may be in some hard places. Your marriage may be in a hard place, and you need to remain dedicated as you seek to work out the problems. Perhaps your kids are in a tough spot, and you have to remain dedicated to them to help them and be a steadfast source, a foundation for them in whatever they're going through. Maybe the job has gotten really tough, and you don't know what's next for your job, but you need to remain dedicated and focused in this day to commit your best to the Lord. There's all kinds of ways that dedication works out. And yes, even in your church attendance, your church commitment, you need to remain dedicated to what God has called you to the family of faith He's given you. And there's all types of spheres that we have leadership in. And the reality is that the best leaders, the ones that make the greatest impact, if you think about your life, you know this to be true, those people have remained dedicated to you all of your life. They've remained dedicated to the cause that you work together for. Some of the greatest Christians that I know have remained dedicated and steadfast in the midst of difficult times in their faith, to their church, and in all the spheres that God has given them. So listen, here's some things you need to know. If you want to remain dedicated, first and foremost, you need to have a conviction about what God's called you to. And maybe there's some spheres of your life where you don't know that God's called you into it. You just kind of stumbled into these spheres. You need to seek God and get a commitment in your spirit that God has called you to your workplace, to your marriage, to your kids, to your church, all these spheres that we remain committed, activities, social activities, hobbies. Ask God about those things. And if He's called you to them, then the next step is do not swerve to the right or the left. Instead, remain committed, steadfast, and listen, that means that every day it's just one step at a time. If you look at Joshua, the people of Israel faced all types of challenges to inherit the land that God had promised. But Joshua remained courageous. He remained committed. Even when he was told to march around the city and not attack and the walls would come down, he did it. There's all types of examples where Joshua led the people toward. And listen, you know the stories if you've read the Bible. Anytime they swerved to the right or the left, it delayed the purpose, delayed the commitment. Yes, God's promises were fulfilled, but delayed the promises because of their lack of commitment and dedication to what God had called them to. So to be a true leader, you've got to stay committed. You've got to stay dedicated. You've got to stay focused on what God's called you to and see Him ultimately work your good and the good of His calling on your life as you remain committed and moving forward by faith each and every day to what He's called you to.